Hello and welcome to Seeing Red, an event for Good Grief Festival. Good morning and thank you so much for joining us today. Although feelings of sadness and loneliness are frequently associated with grief, anger is an incredibly common and often misunderstood emotion which many of us feel when someone we love has died. My name's Lucy Selman. I'm an associate professor at the University of Bristol, where my research focuses on end-of-life care and bereavement. And I'm delighted today to be joined by psychotherapist and author Julia Samuel to discuss the role of anger in grief and how we can best support ourselves and each other through it. Good morning, Julia. Lovely to see you again.
Good morning, Lucy, and everyone who's joined us. It's lovely to be part of this and to have this important discussion about anger.
So I thought we would start at the beginning, and I wonder if you could tell us what anger is.
Well, anger, we're wired to be angry. It's a evolutionary mechanism where the kind of amygdala switches on to code red when we see a perceived threat. So our heart rate goes up, our pulse goes up, we have a dry mouth, and it's a protective mechanism like, stop, don't attack me, don't hurt me. And often it's an experience of hurt, like, oh, you're hurting me. And it's to stop the hurt happening. Fear is often the anticipation of hurt. I'm going to get hurt, don't hurt me. Whereas anger is the expression of it. And it's a healthy protective mechanism that we need to have. It's physiological, as I said, your heart rate goes up, your mouth goes dry, and also it's psychological. So you have this kind of banging message in your head that can be kind of, stop. It can be shouty. It can be quite silent and a bit like, don't even think about it. So there's kind of gears of anger that you can have, but it is there to protect us. And it is extremely common in grief.
And why is it that we give ourselves such a hard time when we feel angry? And why is it that socially we have such a problem with anger, do you think?
I mean, I think societally and culturally, we prefer it when people are kind of sad or kind of open and expressing themselves in a kind of gentle way. And anger is, it's visceral in your body. It's kind of switches on and it's transmitted through your body into the body of somebody else. So it is experienced often as an attack. And actually, even being angry, although some people find it a release, it's an uncomfortable experience being angry because often you feel out of control. Some people can cognitively kind of name what they're feeling and have the feelings of anger and not kind of go out of control. But I think others really feel powerless. They're often angry because they feel powerless. And then they feel that they're disempowered by the anger because it kind of just shoots through their system at 100 miles an hour. And they find themselves shouting at a shopkeeper or strangers or people that they love because it's just, come through them.
Yeah, and I guess because we know that other people might react in that way, that's sort of like, get away from me, you're angry. That makes it even harder to accept our own anger sometimes and to sort of feel like it's okay to express it in a safe way anyway.
Yeah, because I think it's an experience as an attack. And actually, because it's an expression of hurt, what you actually need is someone to move towards you and kind of understand you and be compassionate. But while you're shouting at them, they're unlikely to be doing that. And so often you can be very angry and you feel more angry having expressed your anger than before you did. So you don't get your needs met. I mean, we're going to talk about how that might happen, but I think that's often people just, and then they can get into a spiral of anger, which can be kind of quite frightening.
So I'd like to talk a bit about why grieving people feel angry. But before we move to that, I came across this quote by Joan Rivers, and she writes, anger is a symptom, a way of cloaking and expressing feelings too awful to experience directly: hurt, bitterness, grief, and most of all, fear. And I wondered if you could reflect a bit on that idea that actually sometimes anger can be an emotion that we kind of go to because some of those other difficult emotions are almost too much to bear.
I mean, I think that's right. And it's very kind of individual. And often it's what we've learned in our families about what feelings are allowed to be expressed, what feelings aren't allowed to be expressed. And also we learn from those around us what is modeled about how you deal with them. So maybe in a family, it was not okay to feel kind of hurt. And so but it was okay to be angry. So you cover up the hurt because that feels a bit shameful, feeling hurt. And you're powerful being angry, and that's allowed. In another family, it might be the reverse, that you're in a family that anger isn't allowed and you're allowed to feel hurt. But I think those are patterns and kind of pathways that are set from our development, from observing those around us about what is allowed and what isn't allowed, what feelings are allowed and what aren't allowed.
Yeah, thank you.
I'm wondering if other people are agreeing. These are my thoughts, by the way. So I'd love to know other people's comments and thoughts to add to the conversation, because I don't think by any means I've got it all, covering all aspects. So there may be other ideas people have.
Yeah, thank you, Julia. And obviously, please do add your questions to the chat. We'll be taking questions towards the end of this session. I think what you're saying is so important because, we do all grieve in different ways. And for some people, the sort of go-to emotion and way of expressing their grief might be anger. Whereas for other people, that might be just completely contrary to what they're feeling and how they want to express their grief. And sometimes maybe within families, people have very different ways of coping with grief, and they sort of conflict and clash and end up not really supporting each other because they have such different kind of emotional needs around grief.
I think that's really true, is that every member of a family may express it and experience it differently, although they're in the same family. And, what helps in families is having open and honest communication, kind of recognizing and naming, one person is feeling sad and kind of withdrawing or crying, someone else is kind of raging and stomping around, and there's somebody else who's sort of in between, and that none of those experiences are wrong and they all need to be allowed, but to actually say it to each other. Otherwise you can build up, pre-existing fault lines kind of can get wider, and you feel so alone and in so much pain already. And then the people closest to you feel like estranged from them. You can make what's already really difficult worse.
Yeah, and we'll talk maybe a little bit more about that kind of later on when we consider how we can support other people if they're feeling really angry in their grief. But I wonder now if we could turn to this question of why grieving people are commonly angry, or what is the role, or what is the reason why grief and anger do often go together?
Well, it's kind of two things. The physiological and psychological is that there's an emotion that is a transmitter of information. And so we need to be aware of the emotion. We need to then be able to name it, to cognitively be aware of it. And we then need to find a way of expressing it and having an action that follows it. Because if we block the knowledge of it, that can then turn against us. And one of the ways we kind of think about anger is that anger turned against yourself can turn into depression. But the underlying expression of anger in grief can be from so many sources. It can be walking down the street and you can see a couple, together, and your partner has just died. So it's like, they've got what I haven't got, and the unfairness of it, or going to other family members and they have the same. So that, it can be just that very straightforward feeling of loss that it feels angry. It can be you can confuse because you're angry with the person for dying, and that doesn't sort of feel okay. But actually, it's like, how come you abandoned me? That wasn't the deal. It was health, not sickness and health, and you kind of leaving me. And that could be your mom, it could be your partner, it could be a sibling, it could be a child, it could be your best friend. So it's the kind of the intensity of the relationship, but you can feel left by them and deserted by them. Some people, if from their belief system, which is already there, they can feel that they're being punished by the person that's died for something that they've done wrong. And some of that is informed by kind of magical thinking and guilt. But somehow, if I had been a good daughter or a good partner or a good mother, then you wouldn't have died. That this is, so I feel really angry and hurt that has happened. And I think one of them, sort of all of these is neither worse nor better, but I think with people that I've worked with, some of the most complicated forms of anger is around the circumstances of the death, particularly when it's to do with their powerlessness and they feel maybe a hospital made a mistake, or their family member was killed by somebody else in, say, a car accident, or even, you know, a violent death, murder, or someone, you have a child and they went to stay with friends and they died while they were in their care. So that this, and that can be kind of anger that is trapped in the sort of powerless and fury that you feel that this happened to the person that you loved, and there's nothing that you can kind of do about it, and your anger kind of twists in and can get very locked in you, because you can just have this looping rage around the circumstances, which is truthful and justified, but of course can lead to complicated and complex grief if it gets sort of super stuck inside you. Just the kind of last few that when I was thinking about this, you can be angry at God. You know, how come, if there's a good God, you know, bad things happen to good people, and that if your faith in God is an important part of you, you can be angry with yourself as well, that you're angry with God, and that can really sort of undermine you. And then slightly kind of less degree, I think, when we're grieving, we have kind of very thin skin and everything can annoy us. So that, you know, and your memory is often quite bad. So you can kind of lose it when you get to the car and you realize you've left your car key at home, or you go to the shops and you haven't got something, or you know, it's the small things. You can kind of control yourself with the big things because you kind of defend yourself. And then those small little things can completely unravel you because the anger is there underneath, but you feel like you're going mad because you're furious because you can't find, you know, your shampoo or whatever it is.
Yeah, and there's that. I remember in your book Grief Works, you talk about how you can be angry at the world not being how it should be, that sort of sense of the world being wrong. And that's certainly something I felt in grief, that real sense of nothing is right, and it's actually very hard for people to say and do the right thing sometimes, because actually nothing is right and they can't put things right and you can't put things right. So there is that sense of helplessness all round, and as you said, that kind of lack of power that you feel as well.
And I mean, what is hurting, and the expression in anger when that happens is your basic trust in yourself and life gets torn by the event. You know, like with you, it was a death out of a time. It was a baby that died. You should never bury your child. And so how can you begin to trust in life when something that should never happen has happened? And, you know, then you're raging at the world and life and the unfairness, but also the more you do that, to some extent, the more powerless you feel because the world isn't talking to you. You know, but you need to find a way of expressing it and naming it and saying it, because when you don't, it does turn against you. So anger and grief is incredibly common and it's complicated.
Yeah, and we'll talk a bit more about sort of, what we can do in terms of processing and dealing with our own anger. But just to comment on what you said there, I think, for us, when Ada was stillborn, we'll never know 100% sure sort of why that happened, but it's quite likely that it was to do with the sort of failing in medical care. And so that was certainly something that I spent a lot of time thinking about. Sort of the reason why she died and what could have been possibly done to stop that from happening. And that obviously there was anger kind of associated with that. But one thing that did help me was thinking of something concrete that I could do. So I actually wrote a letter to my GP surgery. And then I sort of tried to draw a line under it and be like, okay, I've done what I need to do. I've said my piece. And now I can kind of draw a line under that and sort of, in some sense, move on or move through what I was feeling. And it did have a good outcome in that they wrote back and they sort of acknowledged that my situation hadn't been dealt with as it should, and that they were going to sort of implement changes to practice because of that. And that was a real help in my grief as well, because I kind of thought, well, okay, this happened to me, but maybe through having written that letter and drawing attention to the problems in the care I received, maybe that stopped it from happening to somebody else. But there is that sense of, if you attach yourself to the outcome, if I'd attached myself to the outcome of writing that letter, then that could have probably been quite problematic, because there is that sense which you mentioned, that sometimes you might get stuck in a loop of your own kind of anger or kind of raging against the unfairness of the world.
I mean, I agree. And with Ada, what sounds, I don't even know if the word is helpful because it's so painful, was that you managed your expectation with the reality of what you were going to get. So people ruminate with anger about wanting to understand and make sense of what happened and have a clear narrative of the story, and every piece of the jigsaw that's missing you can get obsessed and furious by, and kind of look to find it. And it sounds like with you that was what you were going through, but you were able to kind of form the words, say the letter, and importantly, get the acknowledgement and response from the GP's practice and the medical profession. So you didn't feel like they were hiding or running away from something. You felt that they were walking towards you and acknowledging it. And that's true of all fights with people. When someone can acknowledge your hurt and the legitimacy of what you're feeling, you often kind of begin to breathe. But also, as you're saying, I work with people from Grenfell Tower, and I wasn't involved, but I kind of observed a lot what happened with Hillsborough, is that if you invest in the inquiry and the kind of complaint of it with some kind of expectation that you're going to feel better or something is going to feel better, you can really feel disappointed. And actually, when the inquiry is over, you still have to face the fact that whoever it was that was significant to you has died. So it's being realistic with your expectation. And consciously, I think you drew a line and you said, I've done the best I can. These are the limits of what I could say. This is the limits of what they could do, given that Ada, my beloved daughter, has died. And it also freed you then to move through, as you said, and grieve her. Because before that, it had probably blocked your capacity to fully grieve, because the ruminating and the shh doesn't allow you to have all the other feelings that are involved in grieving, which need to be expressed.
I think that leads really nicely on to the next question, really, which is around how we can actually deal with our own anger. Because I know that you talk about a toolkit that we can draw on to sort of help us deal with our emotions like anger, or difficulties we run into in our grief.
So, I mean, the first step with all of these things is awareness, like having a bodily awareness, because often people can't even name what's going on. But sort of the more you kind of slow down and breathe and kind of turn your attention internally, you can feel the bubble, you can feel the kind of heat of anger, like seeing red in the title. And once you've kind of recognized that you feel anger, just venting ramps up your anger, it amps it up, which is annoying because there's a part of one always that wants to vent. But I think you can find ways of expressing it in this sort of toolbox. So the sort of toolbox that I find works with my clients, and I'd love to know what other people do for themselves, is first of all, be honest and face it and kind of know that they're angry. Don't have shame towards yourself. It's like a clean feeling, and that this is healthy and normal in grieving. Find a way of being aware of what it feels like in your body, owning it, and then doing some way of expressing it. And I often think it's exercise helps, like getting outside, moving, hitting a ball, obviously something like kickboxing. It could be screaming into a pillow. It could be punching a pillow. In winter, it could be jumping on ice puddles. So find a way of feeling your power with some kind of contact with your body, moving through nature, contact, so that you feel the force of yourself, have contact, and that empowers you. But when you've done that kind of loop, you need to journal it, write down what you're feeling. So you need to name it, find words to describe it. And it could be, I'm angry, that, all the different things that we talked about before. I'm angry with this person. I'm angry when I saw this. I'm angry at this. I'm angry at that. Intentionally kind of write things down. Then do a kind of breathing exercise. I mean, 5 minutes would be enough, where you breathe in for the count of 7 and out for the count of 11. So that's, you've named it, you've expressed it, you've put the words down. Slow your system down. So you bring your polyvagal system down to kind of flat line, not up in kind of high alert. And then you do something, watch something or listen to something that is funny. So you can watch a little YouTube clip. There's millions of YouTube funny clips of Cats or Michael McIntyre or program or a podcast. And then switch your attention and get on with your days. Because when you watch something funny, you can't feel angry and laugh at the same time. So you've done a kind of full cycle. But also, I think the attitude of it is important, in that you're doing it with kindness towards yourself, permission towards yourself, and acknowledgement that this is a hard thing. And doing that, you can do it in 20 minutes, you can do it in half an hour, you can do it in an hour. So you can give it the amount of time that you've got. Because I think often one of the blockers with using that toolbox is, I haven't got time, I've got to do it later. My kind of warning is that if we leave anger and suppress it and block it and build on it, it does have quite bad outcomes. So it can lead to depression. It is true that, anger that is unexpressed, we can turn it against ourselves, and it can lead to depression. There can be that low level ruminating anger that kind of contaminates every other feeling. So it's very difficult to feel pure joy or happiness or peace, because there's always this toxic kind of anger that affects every other feeling. And we can also, I think we all know people like this, where the anger is just sat there and people are kind of passive aggressive. So they turn their anger, and it's kind of a blame on other people. And I mean, you should never just say it's more this than the other, but the research shows women tend to be more passive aggressive than men. Men tend to be more violent with their anger. So there's more domestic abuse from men. But when that happens, then you get into this cycle where anger is really messing with your life. And, you can have uncontrolled anger. You can use alcohol and drugs to try and block your anger. That creates another spiral. So the buildup of unexpressed anger has, both with your friendships, yourself, and your health, has quite bad outcomes. So it needs to be kind of like all experiences, it needs to be taken seriously and responded to kindly.
Thank you, that's so helpful, and just really practical advice and steps there that we can take. What do we do if someone that we love, whether it's someone in our family or a close friend, is really struggling with anger or feels loads of anger in their grief, how can we best support that person? Because as we discussed, sometimes the instinct is to sort of move away.
That's
and actually what they need is for you to move closer.
So, I mean, I find anger very difficult, you know, from my own background. And so this is more what I know that I should do than what I find easy to do. But I am age 62, I'm slightly better, but still. So because anger is an expression of hurt, someone is kind of shouting at you, I'm hurting because. And so if you're listening, and this would be true of a medical professional in a hospital or a family member or a friend, the thing that helps the most is to listen and acknowledge it and reflect back what they're saying in a non-combative, non-justification. So not asking questions of why are you so angry, or I don't think that's fair enough, or you're being ridiculous, but saying what I can hear you're saying is that you're really upset because of this. Is that right? And check with them. And as you're acknowledging it and naming it, they slowly, their kind of volume of rage does calm down, because you're legitimizing their feelings, you're legitimizing their cognitive understanding, and they can go, oh, okay, I can kind of deal with this. And by allowing it and meeting with them, you can then begin to have a collaboration, and then you can begin to talk about things that they might do that might help them, that things that might work for them, or, you know, what the next steps are. That doesn't always work. Sometimes, and often in families, you just need to have a fight. So this could be around grief, but, you know, the living losses that we've all been through in the last 18 months, there's been a lot of anger and differences and combat in families. And my kind of take on it is that we all need to learn how to fight and give each other a chance to say what they're feeling, hear what each other's saying. But the big thing with having a fight is that you need to have a repair after the fight, that you need to make up. In that you can't make up in the heat of the row. So it may be you shout at each other, you both say what you're angry about, you even kind of signed off and don't do what I've said of listening, but just kind of blame each other and accuse each other. But then you need to do the time out, go away, slow yourself down, and come back when you're ready. For some people, that might be half an hour. For others, it might be, you know, later in the day or the next day. But at some point within the next 24 hours, you then need to come back and have a repair. Like, I understand, I'm sorry I said that you're an absolute bitch. and what I was wanting you to understand was this, and what I understand from you is that. And then you kind of make up. And then expression of anger can actually bring you closer, because you've both kind of it's very exposing and raw, expressing your anger. You kind of really show a side of yourself, which is often experienced like the underbelly of yourself. And you can feel quite kind of startled and scared by the force of what you feel. But if after it you feel met and loved and understood, it can help you thrive in a family. So it's never about not being angry or not fighting. It's how you manage it and manage yourself.
And crucially, that repair aspect, because I think sadly that's what often doesn't happen. You know, if there's a big fight in a family and then it just is left for a long time, and then it causes real fractures, can't it?
It causes real fractures. And then what happens? Sorry, I had to blow my nose. People bring it up the next time, so it doesn't get resolved. So it's stored in the amygdala, like a mini kind of event, which is a danger event. And then, 2 weeks later, you're fighting because somebody hasn't taken the bins out, but you bring back the laundry list of all the fights you haven't resolved. And anyway, you always, and when you, for always, because you haven't sorted it, it's still there, ready to kind of get re-triggered. And the thing about the repair is it takes the distress out of your body. You feel close again, and you can store the fight. You haven't forgotten it, but you store it where it isn't reignited by the next difficult event. It literally just passes. It just goes into the kind of library of your memories rather than the
Yeah. Thank you, Julia. That's so fascinating and also so helpful. So thank you. I better turn to the questions. We've got about 15 minutes left, and I can see there's quite a lot that have come in. So let me just have a look. So a question about COVID. So I've had bereavements due to COVID. I find myself feeling very angry and fearful when I see people not wearing masks or distancing while COVID numbers in England are still high. Any suggestions how to deal with this?
I mean, I'm sorry that you've had bereavements from COVID. And I guess feeling fearful and angry when you see people not distancing and wearing masks is a realistic and a legitimate response to a kind of external event. You know, if anger is you feel threatened, you do actually feel threatened when you see that, and that sets that on track to be kind of on alert and ready to attack. So I guess kind of naming the anger and knowing that you do feel angry is one part of it, but then intentionally doing things that help express it and soothe yourself afterwards. So say it's going to Sainsbury's that you find very distressing, come back and do a version of the toolbox that I talked about so that you can calm yourself down, because otherwise that kind of alertness will stay with you for the rest of the day, and that can compound and build up, that you get more and more distressed every time you go out. So it's a bit like, you ignite something that is messy and difficult, and you have to kind of find a way of cleaning it and getting it out, and then that keeps you clean so that you're not compounding it when you go out again. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. I think that's really helpful advice. I mean, it's such a tough time at the moment, and my heart goes out to anyone bereaved at this time. It's so tough, and as you say, we're still in the middle of it. It's not over, and it's really difficult dealing with the fracturing that's happened in our society alongside grief and anger around how the pandemic's been handled as well. So
can I just add another part to it? And this is anger, but it's also grief, is that our feelings and memories are particularly ignited by our senses: sight, touch, sound, smell, and what we hear. And so if you're grieving through COVID and we're still in COVID, your grief is also ignited. So when you're kind of in the supermarket, your memories of all of what happened and masks throw you back into the memory of the loss. So not only are you likely to be feeling angry with people who aren't being careful because your experience of COVID is that it kills, but you're also feeling the grief as well, which has lots of different feelings to it, which can kind of heighten the intensity of what you feel. And you can be saying to yourself, listen, I'm just in the supermarket, why am I feeling this much? But you're feeling this much because you're grieving.
Yeah, that's so true. Let's take another question. So I have a question here from a parent. So they say, my son is so angry about the sudden death of my wife when he was 6 years old. Any advice or books for supporting a child? And a couple of suggestions. So A Monster Calls by Patrick Ness is a good book about a bereaved boy, and also Michael Rosen's Sad book. But any advice there if your child is really experiencing a lot of anger about the death of either a parent or a sibling? How can we support younger children especially?
I mean, I think the first one is to kind of recognize that his anger is hurt. It is an expression of hurt, like, oh, I miss my mum. I'm so upset. I want my mum. Those two books are really good. They really help. So read those books with him. I would access support from an organisation like Child Bereavement UK that supports bereaved children, bereaved families. And there's a lot of different support for, children of your son's age. Because sometimes as the surviving parent, you're not the best person to support them. So getting a network of other people and community of other people to help is really good. sitting and drawing with him, I would, and get him to kind of color his rage in the different colors and images and shapes and name it for himself. And then doing a version of the toolbox of doing something that comforts him afterwards, and then something that would make him laugh. That kind of little cycle could help soothe him. And the big thing is that you're acknowledging it and you're allowing it rather than shutting it. So what would be unhelpful would be to tell your son, which obviously you're not doing, that you're bad being angry, because then he conflates the feeling of angry with being a bad boy. And of course, that will make him more angry and then more confused and all of those things. So knowing that it's healthy to be angry, he needs to express it, but also it's probably complicating his time at school. He's probably more kind of punchy and cross with his other people in his class. So I'd talk to his teacher, but I'd get him support.
Thanks, Julia. And I know Child Bereavement UK also have really helpful resources for teachers as well, don't they? Which could be helpful.
They have a school pack, yeah.
Thank you for that. Another question here about supporting other people. So how does one help people to have realistic expectations when they seem very fixed in their belief that someone is at fault over a death, or are determined that they're going to seek justice?
I mean, there's a limit of the influence that you can have. And maybe someone's belief that they are going to get justice and that they're right is the only thing that's keeping them standing. And so you, as their friend, if you kind of threaten that and try and knock it out of their hand because you can see it's unrealistic, you know, that might not be helpful. But the thing I would do is sort of acknowledge both, that it would, you know, to say to your friend, you know, tell me what you really want to happen and kind of get them to name it. And then look at the other side. What, you know, how can we manage, or how can you manage, or how can we think about if you don't get that apology, if you don't get that acknowledgement, if you don't get justice, what might we think about how to support you? Because you're not always in control of that, so that you can allow them to have both. But I wouldn't try and argue them out of it, because it'll just enrage them and they'll think you don't understand, and it'll alienate you. And it sounds like you're being a good friend and thinking about it and caring for them, and that really matters. So that is the best thing that you can do for them, being a loving friend and showing up for them.
And the next question is the other perspective, I suppose, the bereaved person perspective on that question, which also relates to COVID. So how can you overcome a death which is unjust, such as preventable death from COVID? The pandemic continues and people are still dying needlessly from this preventable disease.
I mean, it's so complicated. I'm so sorry that you've been bereaved from COVID. And I mean, I would, Lucy, I don't know what you think. I would link it to your experience, is that you have to acknowledge and name the truth of that this could have been prevented, and find a way of expressing that. Maybe, you know, writing letters to people, maybe complaining to your MP, maybe joining the COVID campaign group, you know, doing things that you feel kind of name and externally express those feelings that you have. Because I think when they stay inside, they get kind of contaminated and get stuck in you. But also, if it's possible, I mean, you know, we're emotional beings. We can't always make our emotions fit our thinking, but as much as possible, set a realistic kind of timeline and expectation for yourself of what is an outcome you can find a way of coming to terms with and living with, so that you can begin to accommodate the tragedy of the loss and the waste of the loss, and also not have that overwhelm you for the rest of your life and become complicated grief, where it's then your identity that, and this will take longer than you want. So this isn't a fast process. It takes a long time. But allow yourself to have maybe an image, a small kind of flicker of hope of what of life might be like for you, or what it could look like for you. as you begin to engage with life with kind of more trust and more hope. But I imagine that's quite a long way off right now. Get lots of support.
Yeah, I think yeah, I totally agree with what you said, Julia. I think to find a useful outlet for the rage and the anger is really important. And you know, the COVID-19 Families for Justice group, you know, you could join that. I would look to Facebook, you know, look to people who understand what you're going through, whether that's the anger side of things or grief in general and the sadness and pain. Yeah. And the other thing I think is just to be as gentle as you can with yourself and rely on and lean on those sources of support that you do have, which sometimes come from unexpected places, don't they? But don't feel like you have to maintain all of the commitments and all of the relationships that you had before. Focus on the ones which make you feel comforted and the sources of support that you do have, and just be as gentle as you can. And, you know, we are still in the middle of it, which is going to make it, you know, so challenging, as you said, Julia, isn't it?
And also maybe tell your story in the UK Commission on Bereavement. There's the grief story, the link, so you could add your story there. So you're adding to the data and our understanding that there's going to be there is a commission and there's going to be a report next year. But I agree with Lucy, do both, kind of campaign, join people, find your community to voice the injustice, but also find lots of support.
Yeah, thank you. And if you want to find out more about the UK Commission, if you just Google UK Bereavement Commission via the Mary Curie website, you can access the link to tell your story and write down what happened to you and anything you've learned along the way about how things could be improved for bereaved people. So please do consider that. Some comments here. So I think this one's very poignant. Why me? I often ask myself, why me? And why my mother? Why now? Etc. Just all of this is not right on any level, and my inner child is not having any of it. I think we can all relate to that.
Only with kind of love and affection. It's like, I agree. It's like your inner child is jumping up and down with rage, like, why you and why your mum and why now? And that is a kind of fury and a tantrum. You want to have a kind of tantrum of jumping your feet, you know, in the middle of the supermarket. And a lot of that you're talking about is the powerlessness that you feel, that you've had no control, no say, no one cared, no one listened, no one did what you wanted. And the thing you most didn't want to happen has happened to you. And so that is, of course, a source of real rage. And as it's your mum died, well, actually, I think we all feel small when we're grieving. I think often grief, we become very small, we become quite childlike, and we just want someone to fix things for us and make it better for us and sort us out. I hope you're getting lots of support, but I would, you know, find a way of expressing what you're feeling. And what I do with clients when they have a kind of raging child is I get the adult version of them to kind of listen to their raging child and then find ways of imagining soothing and calming their inner child, of holding them, stroking them, calming them, and keeping them close so they begin to feel safe. I do a visualization, so maybe you could do that for yourself.
Thank you so much, Julia. We haven't got any more time for any more questions, but please do carry on. You can post on the community event Blackboard. Julia and I can both take a look at that as well later on. Thank you so much for watching today, and thank you, Julia, for all your words of wisdom. And before we end, I just wanted to flag, you know, if any of this has made you feel a bit wobbly, or you know, you're really struggling with your grief or with your anger, please do visit our resources page. There's contact numbers there for Crews, for example, and the Samaritans, and we're here too. So please get in touch if you want to share anything with us. Julia, over to you. Anything else?
And thank you everyone for joining us and being part of this community. And I hope, you go to the resource page and find ways of supporting yourself. And thank you, Lucy, for your compassion and wisdom and for starting this amazing festival. so that we come together and can help each other.
Well, I hope it is a source of support and solace to everybody watching. Thank you all, and enjoy the festival. And thanks again, Julia.
Thank you, Lucy.
Goodbye.